When you listen closely to our culture, you start getting some pretty mixed messages about identity. On the one hand, culture tells us you get to choose. You can be anything you want to be. So if you feel like you're a man, then you're a man. If you feel like you're a woman, then you're a woman. And if you're neither, be neither. You get to choose. Yet on the other hand, this same culture often tells us we can't choose. If you have ADHD or you're born with a certain proclivity, then that's just who you are. Embrace it, own it, because you can't help it. That's who you are. So which is it? Do I get to choose, or is it that I'm locked and loaded by science and genetics? If we err on the side of saying you get to choose, then what happens when someone's belief about themselves is broken? See, in college, one of my close friends was anorexic, and she unequivocally felt that she was overweight. But what she saw and believed about herself didn't match the physical reality that everyone else was seeing. In a world that says you get to choose based on how you feel, do we just let her choose and operate based on how she feels, all the while starving and harming herself? On the flip side, if our identity is set genetically, what do you do with the kid who thinks they're nothing more than their disability? That they're a mistake, or that they can't contribute, or that they're defined by their deafness or blindness or their Down syndrome? What do you do with the kid who thinks they're dumb because the letters on the page look backwards in their brain? Obviously, to all of these, we'd say, no, you're more than that. You're more than your disability, and your identity is bigger than your biology. So who gets to choose? What is it that actually informs our identity? The reason this matters is because we tend to behave in line with what we think about ourselves, meaning when we anchor our identity in the wrong thing, we end up living for the wrong thing. I don't think it's any coincidence then that the Bible actually begins by giving us an anchor point for our identity. Genesis chapter 1 is our earliest anchor point for identity. And what Genesis 1 reveals to us is that God is the author of our identity. He's the ultimate anchor point. Without him, we won't have a proper sense of who we are, our worth, our value in his eyes as people bearing his image. And without him, we won't have a proper sense then of our purpose. Realizing that our lives, our existence here is actually tied to something greater. We're not accidents. We're purposefully planned. We have a place and a purpose in his kingdom. Dr. John Walton, an Old Testament scholar, argues that it's easy to view Genesis 1 as merely a creation story, but really, it's more of an identity story. A creation story, he says, by definition, should explain everything about how we got here. But Genesis isn't interested in giving us every detail about how. It's more concerned with helping you understand who is behind creation. An identity story explains the significance of where we come from and why that matters. And Genesis tells us that we didn't arrive here alone or by accident. We're a part of a family, and we have a divine identity as creatures formed in the image of God. Genesis tells us that everything was created by God, but only one thing bears his image, you and me. Genesis 1:26 says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." When you think of that word image or likeness, it's not suggesting that God has a nose or arms or ears. No, when you think of image or likeness, think echo. If you're at the edge of a canyon and you yell, you just might hear an echo ring out through that canyon. And when you hear that echo, you're not hearing a different voice. It's your voice, just one step removed, crashing through the canyon, being repeated for everyone else to hear. Genesis is saying you and I are a reflection, an echo, designed to reverberate through creation for everyone else to see and be pointed back to the Father. What does this mean? Well, this means a couple of things. First, your life bears a divine identity. You bear the image of God. There is something of God in you. That means there is an immeasurable worth tucked inside who you are. For those of you who see no good in you, nothing of value or worth, this is incredible news. You bear a divine DNA. Imagine the president of the United States had a high schooler, and they're in those awkward teen years where they measure themselves against everybody else. And they don't know where they fit. They don't know what they're good at. And imagine if you met them and you were just like, and you hear them say, "I'm nothing. I have no talents. I'm stupid. I'm never going to go anywhere with my life." What would you say to them? You'd say, you're the president's son or daughter. You can go anywhere you want. You get into any school that you want. That opens doors for you and is going to offer access to you that no one else can fathom. That's what we'd say. And Genesis is trying to show us that because of our family connection, being made in the Father's image, we intrinsically have a worth and value that we can't fathom. And because of who our Father is, there's so much more that we have access to than the things we often settle for. Our life bears a divine identity. But second, it means our lives also bear a divine purpose. We don't just have a divine identity, we have a divine purpose. First, to echo God through all creation, but also to rule and reign here on his behalf. We're stewards of what he's made. We're born into a family business. We bear an eternal purpose. We're going to spend a ton more time unpacking that in the weeks ahead, but suffice it to say, we're not accidental or ordinary creatures with no value or purpose. Why? Because we bear an image. You see, God created us. God gave us an image. And as a reflection of him, we bear a divine purpose, and we're stewards and trustees in the family business. And this is set in spite of how we feel or what others say, because God is the author of our identity. He created, he named, he called. There's no certainty in identity when a feeling or desire becomes the compass for our journey. And there's no certainty in identity when other people's perceptions become the defining voice of our value. No, in the words of one pastor, if we want to know who we are, we must start by looking up at him, not around at others, nor within at ourselves. So who gets to choose? God, because God is the author of your identity. And that's very good news because Scripture says God does not lie. And God is faithful to his children. And God remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. And God doesn't make mistakes.